few questions handed up, and I think if there are more questions on cards, maybe someone from ASPP can pull them up. And in the meantime, before I go to the cards as the fallback, let's take some questions from the audience. And I see Gene Mopsick has a question.
So my question is primarily for Lynn, and I'm putting her on notice that I am a New Yorker subscriber. I'm also a Wire subscriber, both in print and in the electronic edition. And I pay extra for that pleasure, for having it electronically. The New Yorker is kind enough to give it to me. But my question goes to this issue of flexibility, and I guess to some of Sean's points that while entities like Condé Nast leave the photographer with the copyright, at the same time, after you're done acquiring all the rights that you do acquire, the photographer pretty much finds himself in competition with you for any ancillary licensing. And I would hesitate to say you probably do a better job than most of my members in marketing those images. And ultimately, I guess that there has to be an understanding that if you in fact are profiting, and again, I work with the assumption that all of these various electronic uses and additional uses you're making, that you're not doing that out of the goodness of your heart, that as a for-profit entity, you're there to maximize the return to your stockholders. And so these are profit-making or soon-to-be profit-making ventures. So my position would be that it's only fair that the people who contribute to that success profit from it. And again, I'm not asking for all of it. I'm asking for some reasonable contribution to their financial welfare. And so, and I know I've had discussions with Condé Nast, with Mr. Levine, I believe, at the Wire. And, you know, they made it clear that they don't, at least for Wire, and I know this was a year ago, that they didn't pay anything extra for the electronic edition usage, because as you say, they usually see that as an extension. And that's all well and good, and I guess on one hand I would expect you to see that, but it's not the way I see it. I mean, I see it that we're adding benefit, that we're giving you a greater position to profit from. And I guess so my question is, why isn't there some room for the rights holder to benefit additionally in this new company?
Yeah, just in fairness to Lynn, why don't we open that question up to everyone, and also just so she and her publication aren't the only people on this spot. That's true, Gene. And then also a theme that came up at the meeting a bunch of us were at this weekend, which is the function between rights, price, and complexity, because I think all of these things really tie into each other. So, you know, Lynn, do you want to?
Well, I'll just listen. As we say, we want photographers and content creators to be able to continue to make a living, and it's good for everybody. I also I appreciate that you did not tell me that your subscription, you know, you've been annoyed by the repeated requests to renew, because I get those comments also. But but what I do want to say is that my comments before were really only about the New Yorker. I don't do the Wired work. I'm not familiar with their contracts. I cannot speak to the rest of the Condé Nast environment. For the New Yorker, if these ventures increase our readership and increase our advertising revenue, then I am confident that we will increase our payment for this set of rights. It is a big experiment for us. I mean, not just for us, of course, how people are going to make money in the digital environment is still up in the air. I mean, to some degree. It is, but we obviously are coming at it from different perspectives. We can't just, we don't have just a print magazine anymore. It just doesn't exist that way. And as I said, we can't buy rights for that. The one other thing I just want to respond to is that we're also not out there competing in the ancillary markets with you in that regard. Maybe some other folks are, but the photographers are certainly entitled to go out there and put their own book together and to sell the images to somebody else after our period of exclusivity is over, and many of them do.
Just one quick follow-up. I understand the experiment issue, but at the same time, I know of no other industry where the suppliers pay for the experiments of the entity. If you want to experiment, you should experiment on your dime, not mine.
Does anyone else have a comment, or should we go to another question?
Not a comment, just
Oh, wait.
No, I think the simple way of looking at it was that images were always licensed in a way that represented exposure. So I think if the electronic use combined with the print use and the price covers the full exposure, then that makes sense. I think some of the issues come up when it looks like the exposure is increasing and the price is decreasing. I'm not saying there's anything to do with the New Yorker. Yeah, I love my digital edition.
Question here?
Yeah, my question just tacks onto this and that, are there true metrics in place to know that the digital performance is growing? Because if that's the premise on which you're going to pay the suppliers, that does that exist? Do you really know that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally know it, but and I wish I did, but our digital product is ABC, counts for our ABC circulation, which is still the basis for our ad rates and everything else. So yeah, it is carefully tracked.
Do we have other questions from the floor? Yes?
I just have one because I've come to it from the other age. What is the page rate? Do you base what you pay on the page rate for the print edition, and then everything else digitally is tacked on to get the big nut? Or do you still have a page rate? Or how does it work financially for the photographer in stock who has his images or her images in the stock house? Do you know what the New Yorker pays for a page in the New Yorker and what it pays for the add-on? Is that?
Well, yes and no. I don't really know because I unfortunately am not involved in that. And of course, the page rate does depend on who the photographer is and if there's a contract, if it comes through a photo agency or if it comes through some other rate. And as I said, we have moved to a system where it is not, a plus. So it's not a page rate plus because it's all one set of rights. As to actually what we would pay, I couldn't tell you.
So I'm going to take one of the questions that was handed to me, and I think this gives Lynn a little bit of a relief because all the questions have been directed to her, and the reason it gives her relief is because she's kind of already told and opened with her story on this. So the question is about, who owns Twitter and Facebook photos, and we already know Lynn's story about the editor who wanted to use that high quality image and was confused, but I was sort of laughing when she told me that because I imagine the rest of the panel has a story or similar to that where their own works were misused, misclaimed, or where you had to clear an image and it started to get really tricky and muddy, or a client asked you to help with that. So to the extent any of the other panelists have a story about the complications or benefits of sort of social media and Facebook and Twitter and all of those things. Maybe intern, if you want, just speak to that.
This is definitely, I don't have a cute anecdote about this. However, I know that this is something that comes up with our work all the time, and it requires a tremendous amount of digging on the part of our researchers to uncover who that original copyright holder is. It's typically not who you see there at first glance, and it takes a trained person to understand that and to know that you have to delve deeper.
And I get questions all the time about, and particularly people who work at publishers who say, can you please tell me in a way that I can tell our picture editors why I shouldn't trust Wikipedia or something with a Creative Commons license. Because anyone can upload a picture and put a Creative Commons license on. I don't know, hope everyone in the room understands what that is. It's a license that allows you to share. And Wikipedia also has a lot of images in them which contain a Creative Commons license. So I speak to people that work in the editorial and textbook publishing, and they're like, can you please just write something for me that I can hand over so I can explain why we shouldn't be using the Wikipedia photos. They're really, you just don't really know where they came from.
Okay. Sean? No? Okay. Good.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'd like you all to break out of the box of copyright and think about 5 years from now, given that there's economic pressure from just the general economic conditions, given that there's Wall Street pressure from the aggregation and concentration of imagery into the hands of what was 25 distributors and is now 2. Given that there's pressure on the publishing companies to experiment with these new media, to spend money on developing the apps, and to try and save money wherever possible, which includes the content suppliers, in 5 years, can you think of anything that holds out hope for all the people that are in these little boats out here bobbing on these big waves? Look at it from 5 years to 10 years out and talk about what might work for creative content producers.
I'll go first and give everyone a chance to think of stuff, because I've been focusing on this a lot. My organization is a nonprofit, and we have lots of slogans, but one of my favorite ones is they're copyright.gov and we're copyright.com. So, we are trying to, we're mission driven, and our mission is to help save the copyright economy and the content industries. And so we're looking at a number of things. I mean, obviously, we come from a collective licensing background, for those of you who understand what that is. We were started in 1978 because of the disruptive power of the photocopy machine on the text industry. And then we've had to adjust to email and intranet and internet. So, a couple things that we're looking at to try to work with rights holders so that they can take advantage. One is the product that we're working with PACA and ASPP and other partners, including Plus now, on trying to come up with a broad blanket license that takes the way users actually share, the way the hosting companies actually host, and say, you know what, we have something for the hosting companies, and that is new paths to monetization, but you've got to include the share, you've got to include the rights holders, you've got to include the creators, and that's got to happen. So one way we look at this, and this applies, by the way, with Orphan Works and everything else, we're looking at collective solutions. Now, those are not the same as a $50,000 license for an editorial use, and therefore these have to be structured in ways that they don't harm those uses, but that can be done. The other thing we're looking at, and we're doing this more in the science space, where content, just like on images, moves constantly. It goes from the website, it gets downloaded, you see this in news as well, so it gets downloaded, it moves around the ecosystem. Trying to find ways that things a beacon. A company called Newsright has a beacon, so you're tracking usage. We have something called RightsLink, where you actually can license from anywhere. And so the idea is, again, you don't know where that content's going, but if every time that content is somewhere, someone who wants to play by the rules and will pay, and those people are out there, and if they weren't out there, we wouldn't have iTunes. Those people can get your content. So it's really about bringing the licensing and the visibility out where it is, and while still, focusing on piracy and those issues where you really can't do it. So you gotta take the world as you see it, build what you can, don't fight everything, but I do think there's opportunities because there's a lot of eyeballs out there. And those eyeballs out there on Facebook and Pinterest may very well be, people who want that image for a bigger editorial use. So there are opportunities. So that's how I see it. Anyone else?
I actually agree. I think there's tremendous opportunity. We live in such a visual world right now, and we're hearing a lot of trends from the publishers that we work with about back to shooting original content. That's something that we've been licensing images from stock and individual photographers to a lesser extent. That's been the trend in the past 5 years. But we're hearing that go back again, this idea of licensing content direct from photographers. The other thing I just wanted to point out, I know that what you had brought up is about content, but I think it also relates to all the pressure that you're suggesting and the change relates very much to the photo researchers and buyers in this room too. We're paid a fraction of what we used to be paid to do the work that we do, and we are asked to do tremendous amount more than we did in the past. The role, as I said and when I spoke, has shifted. Our heads spin about this daily, trying to figure out new models of how to get this work done for the prices that are being presented to us. So not to disregard what you're saying, but to also bring to the light another major issue that's out there. I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but it's something that we deal with all the time.
Like I said earlier, I guess an optimist. I've been called naive too, but I prefer to see it as optimism. I think that despite these pressures, I think particularly in the editorial world, there are a lot of cost pressures, but I think ultimately, despite all the talk about the good enough quality, the lowering the level, that I think there are still publications out there, like the New Yorker, the Geographic, Time, Forbes, Fortune, and actually hundreds of more magazines that we didn't have previously that still need content created for them, custom content shot, assignment work, and I think that will continue. I think the stock market, from my perspective, is, I apologize, has, aside from a few, checks every now and again, it's not something I've ever focused on, and it's certainly not something I would advise anyone as a photographer to focus on now, because I think the prices for relicensing have been just driven down so far that I don't know that that's going to happen, ever turn around again. But I think, meanwhile, new creator content will never wane. It won't fall away, and there won't be a market for it. There will always be a market for it, right? Meanwhile, all this new technology stuff also allows individual photographers or creatives to actually produce stuff and market stuff on their own. I don't know if she's here, but Gail Mooney, who's on the ASPP board with me, I guess a year and a half ago, produced a project, a film, that she's been touring around the country at various film festivals now, and even though she self-funded it, it's actually a for-profit entity. She's made money on it. So I think that's something that prior to this technology happening, social media, marketing, etc., wouldn't have happened before. So I think I prefer to see the positive side of what's going to happen.
Well, Matt Groening, many, many years ago, when The Simpsons first came out, said copyright infringement is the sincerest form of flattery. And I do think that, you know, you can look at the world as all these people are stealing your content, and then you can say, well, why? And the fact is, there's value there, and it's about extracting that value. We have time, I think, for 2 more questions, so I'm going to take those from the floor. Yes?
One quick question. What are threshold skills that individual creators really need to possess in order to embrace some of the challenges here?
Thank God we have an individual creator here. Back to you.
I'm probably not the best person to ask on that. I'm pretty much a Luddite when it comes to social media, marketing myself in general. If you saw the screenshot of my Facebook page, and I don't use that to market professionally. I have a lot of friends that I work with, a lot of photo editors that I've worked with over the years who are friends on Facebook and like to see the little wingtips of my Southwest flights as I travel around the country. But I think the main thing is it hasn't changed too much from what it always has, from this old copyright code. I think much of what we do, certainly much of what I do, is based on relationships. It's not about somebody finding me in this sea of Flickr photos or Facebook or Twitter feeds. It's trying to shoot good quality work and trying to find the people who respect what I'm doing and want to work with me, and I want to work with them. And I don't think that's going to change regardless of the economy.
One last question in the back.
Slightly different question, but in London, in France, and Germany, through digital archiving, you make money for suppliers, through graphic rights or payback system. And it is because I talk about this happening or not happening in the States, and I wonder what's happening there. Because I feel in Europe, it's very much that the image suppliers serve to pay just as the printed word suppliers privately paid. And it does make a substantial difference to our cap, 53%.
Sure. If I heard it correctly, it's basically directed to me, and it's about the difference between how collecting, is this a collecting society question, basically?
Yes.
Okay. So, Copyright Clearance Center is known as a collecting society, and there are organizations like us in every country, but in every country there's a different legal underpinning. Almost every country does it a little bit differently. And in countries, particularly the UK, and it was interesting, I was meeting with someone from the UK photographer community who I won't identify, was complaining about the UK system, which has this sort of extended collective license, which means whether or not you want to be in the license, you're in the license, and then money gets metered out to your organization. But that's within the statute. I can only answer this by getting kind of wonky, and I apologize for that. In the United States, the way we do collecting societies, everything's contract-based. So if we're essentially a rights broker. Unlike every other country, it's completely voluntary, opt-in, contract-based. And so we're not able to say, well, I've just collected X dollars for photocopying, and I'm going to give Y to this group and X to that group. If someone asks us to represent them in the photocopy space, their work gets used. If their work gets used, we pay them for that use. And it's very different, and does lead to confusion, especially since all of us organizations seem similar. But so it's a different legal basis, and it's sort of the best answer I can give you. So if you enter into a license with us and then your material gets used, then you get paid directly. There's no apportioning. We don't have any statutory basis. It's purely contract basis. And as I said, every other country is different from that system. So if people have more questions about that, because I know that's kind of confusing, feel free to ask me.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers. So I want to first
first thank everyone for your patience regarding some of the technical display issues. Roy, would you mind if we tweeted a link to your video or?
No, please do, because that was very jumpy and it really doesn't have the word text in it. Yeah.
We'll include a link in our next ASPP New York missive, an email, and we'll also tweet it, so look for the Twitter handle ASPPNY. Today's discussion is a call to action. At a critical moment in time, copyright is vital, at least 50 shades of provocative and inspiring. I'd like to thank our speakers, Roy Kaufman, Lynn Oberlander, Jackie Lissy-Brustein, Sean Henry, Nancy Wolf, and Christopher Reed. Today's event was made possible by support from our major sponsors. You've heard me mention them before, but ASPP loves them. ASMP, Reuters. Additional funding was also provided by AGE Photostock, Aurora Photos, Cowan DeBetts, Abrams and Shepard, Fundamental Photographs, John Wiley and Sons, and Newscom. So thank you to all of you. Our host, the Scandinavian House. I do hope you guys can come back to see a screening. They have a lovely projector, I'm told. So you are all now invited to tour the galleries upstairs following today's event. There is the American Scandinavian Foundation presents an exhibit called Saga Sites, Landscapes of the Icelandic Sagas. One of the curators is on hand upstairs to lead you through the show. The ASPP is focused on education and networking. Our motive is to keep the buzz between image professionals going. Thank you for your membership. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for coming today. This is what ASPP is about. Thank you.